This episode of the History Guy is brought to you by Home Chef.
The Battle of the Bulge is largely seen as kind of the last gasp of Nazi Germany as the Allied noose tightened around the Third Reich. But while the offensive in the Ardennes was one of the last offensive operations by the German army, it wasn't the last one, not even the last one in Western Europe, because while there was still fighting going on in the Ardennes, Germany launched another offensive farther south in France, in the much less remembered Operation Nordwind.
Thank you, Home Chef, for sponsoring this video and helping me to continue to provide quality content to my viewers. I really can't say enough about Home Chef. It's fresh, healthy food delivered conveniently directly to your door. It's highly customizable with a wide selection of meals. You can even upgrade or swap proteins. The recipes are essentially foolproof, easy to make home-cooked meals made with a minimum of dishes, so cleanup is a breeze. Home Chef is perfect for busy people like myself. It's healthier and less expensive than going out or ordering delivery. And there you go, feta and herb chicken with buttered vegetable medley. Low carb, high protein, perfectly seasoned, and healthy portions. Making dinner has become the easiest part of my day. Scan the QR code or use the link in the description and the code HISTORY50 to get 50% off and free shipping on your first Home Chef box. On December 16, 1944, the Germans had launched the Ardennes Offensive in an attempt to split the Allied lines, with the ultimate hope of destroying the Allied armies on the Western Front. The Germans achieved a total surprise attack and forced the Allied lines west, but failed to achieve their goals and never broke the Allied front. By December 21st, it was already becoming clear to German planners that the momentum of the attack was failing and that the operation teetered on collapse. The German command was looking for a way to relieve pressure on the struggling offensive, and it turned south to Alsace and Lorraine. As Patton's Third Army had pivoted to assist where the Germans had broken through in the Ardennes, the Seventh Army to the south had extended its lines to cover the area he had vacated. Meant to work in concert with the Ardennes offensive, the main goal would be break through the Allied Sixth Army Group, the American Seventh Army and French First Army, and destroy it, as well as recapture the important city of Strasbourg. With Strasbourg recaptured, the Germans would begin Operation Dentist, a planned thrust into Patton's Third Army. In October, the U.S. Seventh Army began a hard-fought campaign through the Vosges Mountains, between the plateau of Lorraine and Alsace Plains. By October, most of France had been liberated, but a strip of eastern France remained under German control, in addition to the so-called Atlantic pockets. The fighting in the Vosges was particularly fierce, as the Germans had the advantage of terrain and defensive positions. Seventh Army Commander Lieutenant General Alexander Patch said of the fighting, "In the Vosges foothills, you dislodged a desperate and skillful foe from positions which gave him every natural advantage." The Allied forces captured Dovel on September 27th and Bruyères, only 7.5 miles away, on October 19th, after 3 weeks of hard fighting. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team, made up of Japanese Americans, played an active and vital role in the campaign. In November, the front finally broke under the pressure, and Allied units were able to liberate large areas in sudden advances, including the important city of Strasbourg on November 23rd, liberated by French troops under General Leclerc. The capture of Strasbourg and the surrounding area put the Allies at the former French border along the Rhine River, with the exception of a pocket around the city of Colmar. The Sixth Army Group paused its advance in late November, while Operation Queen attempted to press into Germany through the Hürtgen Forest. The Ardennes offensive forced a pause for much of the Western Front as Allied forces sought to halt and defeat the advancing German forces. On December 28, 1944, in a speech to his division commanders, Hitler said that the attack has a very clear objective, namely the destruction of the enemy forces. There is not a matter of prestige involved here. It is not a question of gaining space. It is a matter of destroying and exterminating the enemy forces, wherever we find them. The Germans dedicated 2 army groups to the assault on Alsace. Army Group G under General Oberst Johann Blaskowitz, and Army Group Upper Rhine, commanded by Heinrich Himmler. In the Verdun Conference, where Allied commanders had put together their response to the Bulge, Eisenhower had given 6 Army Group's commander, General Jacob Devers, orders about what to do if he faced an attack by the missing German divisions. Give ground slowly on his northern flank, even if he had to move completely back to the Vosges. The Germans could not be allowed to re-enter those mountains, and this line was definitely laid down as the one that must hold. Devers was unique among American generals in that he was the only one not recommended for his position by Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. Devers had to know that it was the first time that Eisenhower had ordered one of his generals to withdraw in the case of an enemy attack. Devers' divisions were stretched thin to cover the part of the front that Patton vacated, and his men were largely not veterans. 3 units, the 42nd, 63rd, and 70th Divisions, were essentially green, having just arrived from the States. His most experienced were the 79th Division and the 45th Thunderbirds Division. The Thunderbirds had been engaged since they landed in Sicily in 1943. In reserve, he had the veteran 3rd Division, the Rock of the Marne, and the 36th Texas Division. On December 31st, German forces launched the offensive against the thinly stretched Allied lines on the outer side of the Rhine River. It was not entirely a surprise. Ultra had intercepted messages indicating German forces were massing opposite Devers' position on December 26th. When Devers approached Eisenhower about the intel, Eisenhower said Devers must on no account permit sizable formations to be cut off and surrounded. Eisenhower expected Devers to withdraw to the mountains, leaving Strasbourg to fall back into the hands of the Germans. Just after midnight on January 1st, 1945, the German offensive began. It was the biggest swarm of Germans I'd ever seen in my life, one American infantryman recalled. At the same time, radios in Berlin broadcast a speech from Hitler. Our people are resolved to fight the war to victory under any and all circumstances. Germany will rise like a phoenix from its ruined cities and will go down in history as the miracle of the 20th century. In places, the American line simply lacked enough men to stop the German assault. Task Force Huddleston, a regimental-sized task force covering a 10-mile-long sector, faced 5 full divisions. The Americans were simply overrun, and Lieutenant Colonel Huddleston committed every part of his force to try to stem the tide. American soldiers reported even supposedly friendly French civilians turning on them as the Germans advanced. According to one divisional history, the retreat was like a walking nightmare. To fill the gap was the 70th Division's 275th Regiment, which was totally green and had never before faced combat. The veteran 45th Division dispatched 2 battalions of the 179th Regiment to help fill the gap. By noon on January 1st, the American 7th Army was being attacked virtually everywhere. Despite bending, the lines didn't break. Eisenhower was already furious. Devers had not withdrawn his forces. There was a political angle to withdrawal. Strasbourg, passed between France and Germany in successive wars, was held dear by the French, and abandoning it would come with a cost to French civilians. In his memoirs, Eisenhower wrote, "The Strasbourg question was going to plague me throughout the Ardennes battle." When de Gaulle learned that Eisenhower planned on withdrawing from Strasbourg, he wrote that losing Alsace would be a terrible wound inflicted on the honor of our country and its soldiers. De Gaulle's orders read that the French cannot consent to the abandonment of Strasbourg, and ordered the French First Army to take matters into your own hands and to ensure its defense. He sent a letter to Eisenhower, which concluded, "Whatever happens, the French will defend Strasbourg." De Gaulle also telegraphed Roosevelt and Churchill. Eisenhower kept secret the fact that he had already ordered Strasbourg abandoned. A meeting between French and American aides came to a head when the French said that they would disobey orders to defend Strasbourg. The American aide announced that the French First Army will not get a single further round of ammunition or gallon of petrol. Just as testily, the French responded that de Gaulle would forbid American forces the use of French railways and communications. The battle in Alsace was threatening to become a major political disaster. When Eisenhower and de Gaulle met directly, they reiterated their positions. De Gaulle would defend Strasbourg, even if it led to a regrettable rupture in the system of command. Eisenhower complained that he was being given political reasons to change military orders. De Gaulle didn't care, and neither did Churchill, who wrote Eisenhower that the significance of Alsace must be taken into consideration. Eisenhower didn't really have a choice. He rescinded the order to withdraw, ordering that Strasbourg be held. In Alsace, the 7th Army was doing everything it could to shore up its sagging lines, sending scratch battalions to try and stabilize the front. Germans of the 6th SS Mountain Division were taken to yelling commands in English to confuse the Americans, and at one point used pistols with whistling rounds that mimicked the sounds of mortars. When Americans first faced them, they turned tail, reporting the SS were supporting their infantry with sledgehammer shelling. But there was incredible bravery as well. Private George Benton Turner of a field artillery battalion of the 14th Armored Division found himself cut off and alone, separated from his unit in an enemy attack on January 3rd. He joined in with an infantry company when he spotted 2 German tanks, followed by 75 German infantry. He grabbed a bazooka and charged under fire. His first shot set the lead tank aflame. He fired a second time, damaging the second tank. He then dismounted a machine gun from a nearby half-track, set up in an open street, and broke the enemy infantry formation. In the American counterattack that followed, he defended the crews of 2 disabled American tanks by firing a light machine gun from the hip and ran through a hail of fire to one of the tanks which had burst into flames to rescue a trapped tanker. The tank's ammunition exploded, wounding Turner and killing the tanker. George refused to be evacuated with the wounded and continued to fight for the next several days. Turner was not your ordinary soldier. He had enlisted in the Marines in 1918, but didn't finish training in time to fight in the Great War. He was employed as a legal secretary in Los Angeles when he got another chance to fight. When he enlisted in the Army in 1942, he was 43 years old, where he was known as the oldest private in Battery C of the 499th Armored Field Artillery Battalion. Because of his leadership abilities, battery officers had suggested he apply for officer candidate school, but he told them that he preferred to stay at the front with his fellow soldiers. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. When President Truman presented the award on August 23, 1945, George was a 46-year-old private, first class. Several hundred Americans were captured in a lightning attack by the 6th SS Mountain Division in Wingen, but now the Americans were counterattacking. The 2nd French Armored Division, serving with the American 7th Army because its commander, General Leclerc, refused to serve with French generals who had remained loyal to the Vichy government, faced the Germans at their most dastardly. As the League column cited an American Sherman, they let their guard down, only to find out that the Sherman was manned by Germans and leading German tanks. The French First Army was expected to take over part of the line, but before they reached it, the Americans had already pulled out. Himmler sensed the opportunity and ordered another assault, counting on breaking out from the Colmar pocket. I count on you to enable me to announce to the Fuhrer in a few days' time that the swastika flag flies again over the Strasbourg Cathedral, Himmler sent to his army on January 5th. The same day, his men crossed the Rhine, again taking Devers and the Sixth Army Group by surprise. French and American counterattacks failed to dislodge them. Indeed, things were looking grim on the whole front as more Germans pushed from more directions. Everywhere a breakthrough could threaten the enemy line, and the Allies were simply out of reserves to commit. In Wingen, at least, elements of the 6th SS Mountain were forced to pull out, having lost 650 of the 900 men that had begun the attack. The breakout from the Colmar pocket was a near thing. French engineers blunted one attack by blowing up a bridge that was only 10 miles away from Strasbourg. The American 3rd Infantry Division held as well. Technical Sergeant Russell Dunham, leading the 2nd Platoon of Company I of the 30th Infantry Regiment, had been dubbed the Arsenal for the large amount of ammunition and hand grenades he carried. With his platoon pinned at the base of a hill, he decided, quote, the only way to go was up. According to a citation, wearing a white robe made of a mattress cover, carrying 12 carbine magazines, and with a dozen hand grenades snagged in his belt, suspenders, and buttonholes, Tech Sergeant Dunham advanced in the attack up a snow-covered hill, under fire from 2 machine guns and supporting riflemen. He cleared 3 German machine gun nests single-handedly, even after he received a 10-inch gash across his back by a round from an MG-42. In the fight, he used 11 grenades and fired 175 rounds, killing 9 Germans, wounding 7 and capturing 2. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, the citation noting, Tech Sergeant Dunham, despite a painful wound, spearheaded a spectacular and successful diversionary attack. 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy rejoined his unit, Company B of the 1st Battalion of the 15th Infantry Regiment, near the Colmar pocket on January 15th, having spent 2.5 months recovering from a wound by a sniper the previous October. Murphy, who had been fighting since the invasion of North Africa, had already received the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star with Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, the Purple Heart with Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, as well as a battlefield promotion. In command of Company B, having been wounded in both legs, in the face of an attack, he ordered the company to withdraw to prepared positions. But he held his ground, calling in artillery from a knocked-out, burning M10 tank destroyer while he used the tank destroyer's machine gun to hold off advancing infantry. It was that action that earned the most decorated American soldier of the war the Medal of Honor. The fighting was vicious. The 3rd Battalion of the 157th Regiment was cut off on January 11th by SS troops and wiped out. Of 5 companies, only 2 men escaped. The 43rd Tank Battalion, some 29 American medium tanks and their crews, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Scott Hall, seemingly disappeared near the village of Herleisheim. All that had been heard from them was some garbled radio messages. The entire battalion had been wiped out by anti-tank guns and infantry anti-tank Panzerfausts in a counterattack by the 10th SS Panzer Division. On January 19th, 6th Corps was forced to withdraw, taking new positions along the Moder River, but the tide was turning. By January 19th, the Battle of the Bulge had turned decisively, and on the 18th, Eisenhower ordered the 101st Airborne Division to leave Bastogne to support the beleaguered forces in Alsace, and soon a whole U.S. Corps would be sent to help wipe out the Colmar pocket. The Germans struck the fallback positions of the Moder line on the night of January 24th, seeming to know where the weak parts of the line were. The green troops of the 222nd Infantry Regiment were hit hardest. Strung thinly along 7,500 yards, facing elements of 3 German divisions, the desperate fighting was often hand-to-hand. An official citation reads, "Ordered to hold at all cost, the regiment withstood the enemy's desperate bid to break the 7th Army Motor River line. Fighting back from ice-filled foxholes, the outnumbered defenders fought off wave after wave of enemy, attacking all along the regiment's front and infiltrating into friendly positions well behind the main line of resistance. Wild fighting raged throughout the night and well into the next day as the fanatical attackers sought to break out into open country, but every measure was met by determined counterattacks. Despite it all, they held. The regimental history remembered that they proved that Americans could fight with a cold passion and fury even without the unlimited supply of material which so many believe is responsible for American success in battle. Elsewhere, the Americans faced German ski troops for the first time, but counterattacks were finding more success, and for one major reason. Hitler had already ordered the offensive in the region to be suspended. The forces were needed for defensive positions as the final offensive in the West failed, and the Russians pressed from the east.
In the months that followed, the Allies crossed the Rhine into Germany, wiped out the remaining pockets of resistance in France. The Colmar pocket was essentially eliminated by February 9th. Allied losses in the offensive were about 19,000 killed, wounded, or missing in action. German casualties are estimated at around 23,000. It was a testament to the tenacity of the Allies, and despite overextended lines and green troops and sometimes very difficult conditions, their line held. But it was also a sign that the closing months of the war were not necessarily the foregone conclusion that they appeared, because there were points at which the Sixth Army's position was truly tenuous, and if they'd been forced into retreat, it could have been very costly to the Allies in terms of ground, equipment, and men. But it's also testament to how desperate and in the end powerless the German army was in the closing months of the war. They threw everything they had at the Allies and came up short. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop, book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.